Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. Not everyone is cut out for the tough life of being a bounty hunter or career soldier in the Star Wars galaxy. Some people don't mind working that good old 9 to 5. But for those of you out there who do make a living dodging blaster bolts, slugs, and lightsabers, we've created a short list of what I consider are the pinnacles of protection in the Star Wars galaxy. Because at the end of the day, not everyone can be a force wielder and run around in a robe waving a laser sword. Heck, even the smarter ones wore armor, just in case something got through their defenses. Now, in this video, there will be several pieces of armor that exist only in Legends, or at least partially in Legends, and my explanation is this. Until a legend is contradicted directly by canon, there's still a possibility that it's true. Just like in our own world with like Santa Claus and Lindsay Lohan's twin from Parent Trap. Our first piece of armor falls into that category. It's been mentioned and seen in both the Clone Wars and Rebels and now is partially canon. I'm talking about, of course, Mandalorian armor, one of the central pieces of Mandalorian culture. Despite what people might think, the Mandalorians aren't a race. Now, naturally, most of the best Mandalorians are humans, but any species can be a Mandalorian. It's really their shared lifestyle and appreciation of armor that unites them as a people. A Mandalorian's armor is oftentimes custom made and handed down from one generation to another. The best sets of armor were made out of a material known as Beskar, or for all you Thai out there, Mandalorian iron. Only found on Mandalore and its moon Concordia, Beskar is one of the toughest materials in the galaxy. And conveniently, only Mandalorian armorsmiths know how to refine the raw ore from Beskar into a usable form. A top-of-the-line Mandalorian iron suit was impervious to most blaster bolts even after repeated strikes. It was also lightsaber resistant, which was useful because the Mandalorians didn't always get along with the Jedi. But such a suit of armor was extremely expensive. Not even the Fets wore the real thing. Their suits were made out of a combination of Duraplast and Durasteel. There is a weakness in the Mandalorian armor, which is in the joint areas where the Beskar plates have no coverage. So if you ever have to face a Mandalorian, which I totally don't recommend, aim for those spots. Next up is another suit of armor which, in a way, was inspired by Mandalorian armor. Legends has it a group of Mandalorians served as the initial trainers and father figures for the first few batches of clones. The most aggressive and capable clones were made into Commandos. Like the ARC Troopers, the Clone Commandos were given special equipment, including the best armor in the entire Republic arsenal, the Coton class Commando armor. It's what gives the Clone Commandos their unique and bulkier look. Weighing in at 20 kilos or 45 pounds, this was one of the most advanced pieces of kit on offer. For one, it's one of the few pieces of armor in Star Wars that actually has a deflector shield built into it. Prior to this, personal shields were rarely used on organics because of the intense amount of radiation these devices gave off. Perhaps one of the reasons why the Commandos could use such a device was because the armor was so thick. One Clone Commando was even able to survive a point-blank headshot from a Verpine Shatter Gun, which is an extremely powerful railgun which fired high-velocity projectiles that were much more deadlier than a blaster bolt. The armor could also be sealed from vacuum and could administer back the gel to heal wounds on the wearer's body. A backpack also came with the kit, and that could be configured depending on what kind of mission the Commandos were going on. The deflector shield is what really made this suit of armor special. Without it, you're just looking at an extremely thick piece of Duraplast armor. It could stop most blaster rounds, but a lightsaber could make short work out of it. Our next armor wasn't made in the traditional way, it was grown. I'm talking about the legendary Yuuzhan Vong crab armor. The Yuuzhan Vong were an extragalactic warrior species unlike anything the Star Wars galaxy had ever seen before. They bioengineered all their technology, and for the most part, their equipment, weapons, and vehicles were far more advanced than the technology of the New Republic and its allies. Using this armor, the Yuuzhan Vong warriors were unstoppable on the ground. The armor shell had a tough crystalline structure that made it resistant to blaster rounds and even lightsabers. Because it was a living being, it could even repair itself in the field, and it was extremely light for the amount of protection it offered. The armor had a weak spot though at the armpit where the gills for the crab were located. Certain airborne toxins could also be used to kill the crab armor, but even dead, it was still a pretty tough piece of armor. Next up is the terrifying legendary ancient Sith Orbalisk armor. It was rediscovered by Bane accidentally while he was on a hunt for Sith holocrons. Orbalisk armor was made up of a bunch of parasites. These creatures would wait in a dormant state for an extremely long time for a host to walk by so they could latch onto them. Once they make contact with an organic being, the Orbalisk bit into their flesh and began feeding on their host. After a while, the Orbalisk would reproduce, covering most of the host's skin until their entire body was covered by parasites. So unlike other armor on this list, there are actually no weak points at the joints. It was only with a special helmet that Darth Bane was able to stop the parasite from covering his face. If a host would attempt to remove the Orbalisk from his body, the parasite would inject a lethal toxin into his bloodstream. But some Sith purposely chose to wear the Orbalisk because its skin was so tough that not even a lightsaber could cut through it. The Orbalisk fed on the dark side energy of its host. In return, it injected a chemical cocktail that increased regenerative abilities and strength. The armor was also extremely painful, and Sith like Darth Bane fed on that pain to make himself even stronger. The one weakness the armor had was exposure to electrical charges like force lightning. When Darth Bane's own Sith lightning was reflected back at him, it killed some of the Orbalisk on his body, releasing deadly toxins that almost ended his life. Which makes the Orbalisk as protective as it is dangerous. The last armor I want to talk to you guys about appears in almost every Star Wars entry, both canon and Legends. It's usually worn by main characters or those that are crucial to the plot, which is why it's called plot armor. Okay, that's kind of a cop-out. I'll give you something better. After the Clone Wars, General Ron Mock started a legendary project known as Dark Trooper. Mock was tasked with creating the next generation Stormtrooper outfit. A strong supporter of close-quarter combat, the General created a series of soldiers ranging from cybernetically enhanced clones to battle droids. The most advanced version of the Dark Trooper project was the Phase 3 Dark Trooper. This was more of an exoskeleton than just a suit of armor. It was made out of a metal known as Fyric, a material that was nearly as indestructible as Mandalorian iron. The suit was also equipped with a ridiculous amount of weapons, including assault cannons and shoulder-launched missiles. Unfortunately for all of us, only a few suits of Phase 3 Dark Trooper armor was constructed before Ron Mock was killed off by a meddling Jedi. Just imagine how useful these armored suits would have been in large numbers against the Yuuzhan Vong. One of the major difficulties I found when creating the story was finding high-level armor that existed in canon. Even the two armors that we discussed, the Mandalorian Armor and Commando Armor, had very little information about it. Perhaps it's a way for the new canon to explain that Star Wars is a galaxy where offensive weapons are much more powerful than defensive measures. Which is probably why you should always try to find a balance between protection and the weight of your armor. It doesn't really matter how thick the Coton armor is. If you can't move with 45 pounds of gear on you, you might as well go into battle with a t-shirt on. Because it's always better to avoid getting shot rather than testing your armor. Well guys, that's our video today. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification button, and like us on Facebook. And a special thanks to all you Patreon supporters out there. A word of advice to all you looking out for new armor. Make sure it's not white, unless you live on Hoth or Crate or something like that. Well guys, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.